After successfully getting Gina Carano fired, the cancel mob didn't spend a lot of time sitting on their laurels. Instead, they moved straight onto the next target, namely Ahsoka Tano herself, Rosario Dawson. That might not be a coincidence. On the contrary, this might all be orchestrated directly from Lucasfilm, as we shall see. In this editorial, I will begin by going through the entertainment media complex response to Gina Carano teaming up with Ben Shapiro and getting back in the ring before anyone knew what hit them. Then I'll explore the machinations behind why Rosario Dawson would appear to be next, and how the Kennedy faction of Lucasfilm could be the puppetmasters behind it all. The idea with cancelling someone isn't just to take their job, but to utterly ruin their life. The cancel mob isn't fully satisfied until their victim is living on the street in a cardboard box, and even then they'll laugh and gloat. So Carano teaming up with Ben Shapiro was not at all part of the plan, and it only means the narrative of destruction must continue in other ways. Because someone with direct connections to the trades have decided they're not done with Carano yet. But what if there are no other points of legitimate complaint to attack? Well, then they'll work with what they've got, no matter how pathetic it might be. And thus, we've gotten a few hit pieces from the entertainment media complex in the last few days, one weaker than the other. The most notable of these is the one from The Hollywood Reporter. On February 19th, on the eve of the release of Carano's interview with Ben Shapiro, The Hollywood Reporter released an article titled, "Gina Carano's family is deeply rooted in Nevada casinos with a $725 million stake." Well, our good friend, writer and producer Kamran Pasha had some thoughts on that, which he shared in a February 21st live stream on Midnight's Edge After Dark.
Cameron, I brought you on specifically because you pointed out something that I noticed as well earlier in the midst of all this Gina stuff. And you being somebody who's not only worked at Disney, you've seen the industry work. Yeah. And what I'm referring to, of course, is they had to go right away and start digging even deeper to try and find something, just anything for people to not like and to smear Gina with. And that's clearly what this is here. And you reposted this on Twitter, and my thoughts reflected yours right away when I saw it. That's clearly what they're trying to do. And to me, it's like, oh boy, if this is the worst they can find, give me a break.
Yeah, I mean, it's really sleazy stuff. You know, they're trying to make, story about, oh, her family's involved in the casino industry, so they must be bad people, they must be mobsters, whatever they're implying. They're just not good. They're not good. They're not good Christian folk, right? I mean, so that's certainly the implication here. Look, one of the central things is the trades are largely used, the trades includes Hollywood Reporter, are largely used by the studios as mouthpiece. Now, I've got friends of mine who are reporters at the trades. A lot of them do real journalistic work and investigative reporting. But one of the functions of the trades has historically been, since the founding of Hollywood, to serve as the official PR of the industry power players and to get the message across that everyone is supposed to regurgitate, right? And so this article coming out now, especially when Ms. Carano's interview is about to hit or has already hit for some people or her thing, it's not even damage control. It's an act of aggression in the hopes of discrediting her in some fashion. It will not work, and it will blow up even further in Disney's face. And this is, I don't know who, it's going to be that moment that I tweeted, which it'll be some executive being pulled in to Bob Chapek's office when this goes real bad, and they'll be like, it was a bad call, Ripley. It was a bad call, right? That's what it's going to be. And that moment, the bad call Ripley moment is coming. Well, what they're trying to imply is that Vegas is sleazy and that maybe there's an implication of mafiosa connections and Carano is an Italian name. And there's a stretch going on here, right? There's a stretch going on here. I don't know what they think they were going to accomplish with this. But if the purpose was PR, there's no PR to this. The other purpose is to tell people like me what the limits of what I can talk about are, right? The industry has now come out and is saying Gina Carano is involved with, she's not just an anti-Semite and a racist, and she's involved with corrupt, sleazy Vegas people. They're telling us what our talking points are, because I hear whenever the trades start doing this kind of stuff, those talking points are regurgitated by fellow industry people because they got to stay within the lines of what is acceptable. So these are the talking points they're giving us as to what we are supposed to say now.
Well, that certainly seems insidious, and that's not all. In a February 22nd article, Inverse interviewed some of those behind the Fire Gina Carano hashtag on Twitter, and what they had to say was as enlightening as it was scary. The scary part being that teenagers who mentally reside in a cultish bubble, who drinks all the Kool-Aid that goes with it, are seemingly the ones that Disney and other corporations will bend the knee for. I stress seemingly, because as we shall see, the corporations are no more beholden to them than they decide they want to be. But let's get into that article and explore the narrative they are trying to get out there. Inverse describes these people as stans, a term I admit I had to look up, but it refers to a particularly obsessed fan. The term being derived from the Eminem song Stan, which is about a particularly disturbed and deranged fan. So, in other words, stans would appear to be what I personally have always referred to as rabid lunatic nutcase fans, the ones that have taken it just that little bit too far. These are certainly what I would not hesitate in referring to as toxic fans, in the truest sense of the word. Inverse explicitly describes them as 15 to 17 years old, and in describing how they themselves view the Carano situation, they to me reveal themselves as being completely detached from reality, as they were seemingly traumatized by the hate speech both they and the article's author imagined that they saw in Gina Carano's tweets. After concluding that these stans would prefer to see Cara Dune either recast with someone non-white to increase diversity or be killed off from the show period, the article moved on to the next item on the agenda. The article reads, though not currently a part of the Mandalorian recurring cast, Rosario Dawson is poised to star in her own Mandalorian spin-off series simply entitled Ahsoka. However, Dawson and her family were recently sued by someone who claimed to have been purposefully misgendered and even assaulted by them. Though all charges against Dawson herself were later dropped, the fandom is wary another Carano-like situation is lurking. It bugs me and several other people, and I think it would be good if they at least recast the actress, because she already makes so many people uncomfortable, says V. Kennedy, and this would be a Twitter stan, agrees, adding, I think that the majority of stan Twitter, myself included, are skeptical of her because we don't know if the charges on her are true or not. Here, I think it should be emphasized that the charges weren't dropped due to some technicality, but by the offended individual theyself, I guess. Furthermore, this Inverse article fails to mention that Rosario Dawson already went on an apology tour, and the whole situation was addressed and attempted diffused in a puff piece by Vanity Fair, which was no doubt organized by Disney. This implies that Rosario Dawson bent the knees to Disney and actually went through with that whole apology and punishment ordeal that Disney also wanted for Gina Carano, but that she declined. That was no doubt a rough ordeal, and in her interview with Ben Shapiro, Gina Carano suggested that there was another whose story would turn things around, but whom she wouldn't out. Our good friend Mr. H Reviews is of the opinion that she might have been referring to Rosario Dawson, and while we don't know if this is correct, it would certainly fit the evidence. But whatever Rosario went through, it was all for naught. Not only did the accuser drop the charges, not only did she already go on the apology tour, she has come out as a member of the alphabet community herself, but none of that matters, because in the minds of the stans, it would appear you are guilty upon accusation. As such, their brand of logic would appear to dictate that Rosario Dawson therefore must be cancelled anyway, just so everyone can feel snug and safe. The stans told in verse. Stan Twitter tried to get #FireRosarioDawson trending, but a lot less people were on board. But I guess they're hopeful for the future. The Carano success would have taught them that these things sometimes take time. The article more or less concluded by celebrating Carano's firing, and implied that Mando viewership would now increase since so many more people are now free to watch the series. That is a notion I would dispute. First and foremost, these stans that Lucasfilm have chosen to use as the indicator of all Star Wars fans everywhere are so few and far between that outside of Twitter, there's no hint of their existence anywhere. They don't drive merchandise sales, otherwise Cara Dune toys wouldn't be such huge sellers. They don't drive views to the official Star Wars YouTube channel, and they put in a pitiful effort to stand for Kathleen Kennedy when she is ratioed to oblivion, both on the Oscars and on the official Star Wars YouTube channels. I submit that the number of Disney Plus subscribers they gained as a direct result of firing Carano is insignificant compared with how many they lost. I have a hunch that in listening to the stans, they just might have chosen to cater to the smallest subset of fans there is, at the expense of a far bigger crowd that actually leave merchandise money in Disney coffers. And this larger group of normies certainly loved that Cara Dune merchandise, to the point that it's exploding on eBay after Lucasfilm made the decision to cancel it all. A decision we hear caused several third-party licensees to actually walk out on their remaining options. So why would Lucasfilm submit to the stans? Are they really beholden to the opinions of the most toxic and uneducated fans of all? Or alternatively, are the stans merely useful idiots serving another purpose? As we have previously covered, Lucasfilm is, by all accounts, a company divided between the Kennedy faction and the Favreau faction, and the two have no love for each other, or what the other is doing. To those who came in late, the Favreau faction are responsible for the Mandalorian and the cinematic universe of sorts to be built around that, while the Kennedy faction are making what they try to bill as the future of Star Wars, with the High Republic Publishing Initiative. The only live-action crossover with that is reportedly Leslie Headland's in-development Acolyte series, which may or may not star Amber. According to what we have been told from our sources, so do take everything with a grain of salt from this point onwards and treat as rumor. The Kennedy faction are said to be ecstatic by any social media campaign that targets anything associated with Favreau's brand of Star Wars, because that is what they want to get rid of. We have been told in no uncertain terms that the smooth ship that Favreau has been running and the huge influx of subscribers that he has brought to Disney Plus with The Mandalorian has made Kathleen Kennedy and her people look even more inept to the higher-ups at Disney than they already did. So they are very happy about anything that enables them to point a finger at Favreau and say to the Disney higher-ups, "Look, there is trouble coming from his camp too. He is not the savior you thought he was. So why don't you just take those MCU-level budgets that you gave to him and give them to us instead?" The Kennedy faction don't care how successful The Mandalorian is, or how important it is to Disney+. They don't care about Disney's overall financial health, or Lucasfilm's contribution to that end. What they do care about, though, is the ideopolitical messaging both the sequel trilogy was and the High Republic is infused with. From their point of view, Favreau's Star Wars undermines that, and therefore it must be destroyed by any means necessary. To this end, our sources are pretty clear that Lucasfilm isn't any more beholden to the Twitter stance than they decide they want to be. But since this particular minority of fans are ideologically aligned with the Kennedy faction, they have chosen to highlight them as representatives of the fanbase at large to the higher-ups at Disney, and argued that if the Twitter stans are pleased, then the overall audience will be pleased. This, of course, is bullcrap. Kathleen Kennedy's Lucasfilm zeroed in on the stans specifically because they are down with the same ideopolitical cause as Kennedy, not because they in any way, shape or form represent the built-in Star Wars audience. And in situations like these, they serve as excellent, useful idiots. We have been told that the key instigators in getting the stans riled up against Carano in the first place came directly from the Kennedy faction of Lucasfilm. According to our sources, the Kennedy faction were the driving force behind the #FireGinaCarano movement. They are still trying to damage her through the entertainment media complex, and they are the ones now trying to get #FireRosario Dawson trending, so that they can turn around and use that as an excuse to fire her, and that way sabotage Jon Favreau further. The stans may think they are the ones behind it, but not a single one of them will be able to say who came up with the idea. It just came from their general Twitter community. More precisely, it came from the numerous Lucasfilm Kennedy faction plants in their community. But the individual, genuine stans don't know that. After Rosario Dawson, those Kennedy faction plants will move on to Bill Burr and Carl Weathers, and anyone else they can find anything on that can serve to drive Stan Twitter into a frenzy, and use that as an excuse to sabotage Favreau even more. Just like what our good friend Doomcock reported, we have also been told that the Kennedy faction were delighted to see #CancelDisney+ trending, and they were equally delighted to see fans abandoning WandaVision as well. The Kennedy faction wants audiences everywhere to boycott Disney+, all things Marvel, and especially all things Favreau, because they will shift the blame for all of that onto Favreau, since Gina Carano was one of his. Because ultimately, it is Jon Favreau and his brand of Star Wars that the Kennedy faction really wants to take down. Will Disney fall for it though? We have heard some reports to indicate that Disney higher-ups are increasingly starting to recognize that it was in reality Kennedy all along. She and her camp are costing them a fortune in goodwill and in Disney Plus cancellations, and patience is starting to wear thin, and they aren't the only ones noticing. This whole Gina Carano ordeal has opened the eyes of a great many people, both inside and outside of Lucasfilm, and Disney do not come off looking any better for it. Will the House of Mouse have the fortitude to do something about it though? There we've heard conflicting reports so far, but we'll keep you up to date as we learn more. Till then, let me know your thoughts on all of this in the comments.